This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
How will China's economy fare in 2023? With the World Bank forecasting 4.3% growth this year, some people are more optimistic. Why? And will Brazilian President Lula da Silva's third term in office as president usher in better relationship with Beijing? If so, what will be the impact for both countries? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Liu Xin. Since China optimized its COVID strategy, all eyes are on the country's economic growth prospects. The World Bank has forecast that China's economy will grow by 4.3% this year, and China's economic powerhouses, Guangdong province in South China and Zhejiang province in eastern China, have both set GDP growth targets of at least 5% for 2023. To what extent will China's economy rebound this year? What will the government do to support businesses, and what's at stake as Chinese people gradually regain their confidence in spending? I was pleased to be joined from Beijing by Professor Yao Yang, Dean of the National School of Development at Peking University. Last December, you said that China's economic growth in 2023 will reach at least 6%, and quote unquote, it wouldn't be too outrageous if economic growth reaches 8%. Why are you so optimistic?
Well, there are several reasons. First of all, China has left the first wave of COVID back. If you look at the data and also people's feeling, you can tell that the first wave of COVID has almost ended. Economic activities have come back. That's the first and foremost reason for my prediction. And second, China's potential growth rate is still between 5 and 6%. But if we look at the average of last 3 years, it's around 4.6%, so way below China's potential growth rate. So to reach the average growth rate, that is China's potential growth rate for say 5 years' time, then in the next 2 years, China has to grow much faster than China's potential growth rate. And thirdly, we can see that consumption is bouncing back. That's going to be a major driver for China's growth this year.
Well, some people are predicting that although some level of normalcy is back, there may be more waves, and consumer confidence may not bounce back as much as one wish. China's retail sales last November sank by 6% year on year. Are you concerned about the lingering effect of the COVID impact on China's consumption, and what measures will China take to increase domestic demand?
It was exactly because last year China's consumption growth was so low that actually would make growth of consumption this year much easier because there was a low base over there, right? So for example, if China's consumption growth stopped declining, then this year that's a contribution to the overall GDP growth, right? But that has been said, I think we have several positive factors over there for China's consumption growth. One, despite the possible second wave of COVID, I mean, people are more prepared than before. I think the government is also more prepared than before, right? So, say in the spring, a second wave of COVID would come, but because people have got used to it, then people would still go out and have normal business activities, I think. I mean, look at the last 2 weeks, and currently, you go to train stations, airports, you see business travelers and ordinary travelers have come back, right? So I think people's confidence for a normal life is now back. And I believe the government is going to roll out some measures, policies to boost consumptions. For example, China's property market is going to come back to normal. I wouldn't say it's going to grow so much, but as long as it comes back to normal, that's going to eliminate a huge drag of consumption growth, because the property market has a long chain of backward and forward linkages, and it is very much linked to China's consumption. So if the property market come back, then consumption will come back, right? And second factor is that many provinces have rolled out the consumption coupon plan. That's going to help. But of course, personally, I would like to see that the central government takes some steps and also issue consumption coupons.
A central government economic meeting at the end of last year pledged further support for the private sector. As we know, the private sector is very important for the Chinese economy. For instance, in 2021, it contributed nearly half of foreign trade, over 60% of GDP, and 80% of urban employment. Are private sector companies getting the much needed support they need after 3 years of strict COVID measures?
Well, during the COVID period, the central government and also provincial city governments have done a lot to support the private businesses. Last year and then the year before, the central government gave a tax cut of trillions, I think 2 to 3 trillions RMB, right, to help those private business to stay in operation, right? So that helped a lot. I believe this year the government will continue some form of tax relief. That's going to help private business, right? And this year, the government's policy will be moved toward economic growth, right? So policies on private business will be more accommodating. I mean, from the private business point of view, for them, what the government should do is to stabilize the policy and to level the playing field. That's quite important to boost the confidence of private businesses. And I believe this year we are going to see that.
Do you see signals that their message is being heard and heeded, that they will get the kind of certainty that they need to invest in their businesses?
Well, certainly, yes. Look at the economic conference held last December. Right? There is a strong message sent out to private business that central government is quite concerned about the confidence of the private business. And I believe in the coming so-called 2 sessions of NPC and the CPPC in March, more policies will be rolled out to support the development of private business.
We'll certainly keep a close watch on that. As I just mentioned, you just had a tour of the United States of about 2 weeks, and you met extensively your US counterparts, especially in the business sector. What is your impression of the kind of economic relationship, the stability of the economic relationship between the two largest economies? Is there a sense of lack of confidence or skepticism in China's growth prospects?
Yeah, so we had a tour Washington, D.C., and then went to New York City to have our annual economic dialogue with our American counterparts. Our impression is that first, U.S.-China relations will not go back to, say, the situation before 2018, when the trade war began. Right? So United States is quite determined to compete with China. Right? And second, United States government is also determined to set up a so-called small yard hyphen to contain China's technological progress. I mean, this is not for the United States to stop China's growth, but more or less out of its anger about China. Right? China is growing so fast, and China holds to its own values. That actually the root cause for U.S. attitudes towards China.
What's the impact on the economy, on the economic relationship between the two sides?
Well, that has a huge impact, right? First of all, United States is quite determined to decouple with China the high-tech frontiers. Okay, and second, it does not want or does not have the appetite to improve economic relations with China. For example, I don't think the United States is willing to get rid of the tariffs set up by the Trump administration. Okay, so that's kind of the basis for U.S.-China relationship. But on top of that, we also see hopes for the two countries to sit down and talk and to improve the relations in some aspect. For example, in climate change, there is ample room for the two countries to cooperate.
Well, still focusing on economic relationship, although, you know, we have the factors that you just mentioned, but trade between the two sides, for instance, did grow. Trading goods at least grew by some 4% year on year. I mean, last year compared to 2021. So is there still some room for trade relationship to continue to grow? And what's the impact of all of the factors you just mentioned on China's growth prospects?
After the trade war began, U.S.-China trade declined for a short period of time, but then it resumed growth very quickly. As you said, U.S.-China trade volume is still growing. I think the business on both sides have found a new equilibrium, despite the high tariffs set up by United States. Chinese exporters have found a new and higher ground to export to the United States. Okay, so to me, even with the high tariffs, U.S. and China trade relations will continue to grow. This also says that the trade war is just detrimental for American consumers, right? Because it really hurts.
But for China's economic prospects for 2023, is that going to be a big factor?
I don't think so. As I said, Chinese exporters have found a new and higher ground to export to the United States. So it has become kind of a new normal. So the trade war elicited by Trump has become just imposing a cost on American consumers.
A Japanese think tank recently forecast that China's nominal GDP is unlikely to surpass that of the United States in the next decade. What is your take?
Well, I read that report. Their method was quite simple. They just assume by 2035, China's growth rate is going to converge to American growth rate, which is 2%. Then they did this linear average. That was totally wrong. It's not scientific. My projection is that China is going to take over United States in nominal GDP by 2030, probably the latest. I mean, look, China's growth this year is going to be at least 5%. United States about 1%. Okay, so China's growth is going to contribute 60% to world growth this year. Right.
Wow.
So over the next several years, China is going to have a new round of high growth, relatively high growth, and the United States is going to have a low growth. Okay.
Well,
so
yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. A lot of work needs to be done there. We hope your prediction is correct. Of course, that's both sides will continue to grow, and the ordinary people will share in the benefits. We have to leave it there. Many thanks, Professor Yao Yang, Dean of the National School of Development at Peking University. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to talk to you.
Professor Yao Yang, Dean of the National School of Development of Peking University. We'll take a short break now, and when we come back, I'll be talking to Evandro M. de Carvalho, head of the Center for Brazil-China Studies at the Getúlio Vargas Foundation School of Law. Stay with us.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
Making sense of the overwhelming wave of information means cutting through the noise to shine a light on the heart of the story and making room for new perspectives. True understanding means the ability to see events from more than one side. I'm Liu Xin, and this is The Point. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva assumed office for the third time at the beginning of this year, actively pledging to pursue multilateralism and develop cooperative ties with China and other international partners. Yet, supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro stormed the country's Congress on January the 8th, eerily reminiscent of the storming of the U.S. Capitol 2 years ago by supporters of former President Trump. Are we seeing a deeply divided Brazil? Does the leftist leader's return to office imply better relations with China? And what are the likely challenges for bilateral ties. I was pleased to be joined from Buenos Aires, Argentina, by Evandro Carvalho, head of the Center for Brazil-China Studies at the Getúlio Vargas Foundation School of Law in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He has lived in China for several years and is considered a Laonais, meaning someone who knows China well. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Carvalho, joining us from Buenos Aires, Argentina. So Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva just took office as president of Brazil once again, but supporters of the former president storm the Brazilian central government institutions days after he took office. What is your comment to what has happened in the Brazilian capital, and how big of a challenge is that for President Lula's administration, his new term, and for Brazil's democracy?
I think that there is a similarity between these two facts. I mean, the invasion of the capital in the United States and also the invasion of the headquarters of the executive, judiciary, and the legislative powers in Brazil. So these facts allow us to think that they were acts planned, I think, in advance, and that they could be the result of a broader political action beyond the national territory. So these movements that openly disrespect the Constitution of Brazil deteriorate our democracy and create a climate of terror that undermines Brazilian social stability. And these radical supporters of former President Bolsonaro are not accepting the result of last year's Brazilian elections, but they want to impose their will through force and by disregarding the powers of the republic. These radicals want to convey the idea that Brazil is divine, you know. But a recent survey published yesterday in Brazil by an institute called Datafolha revealed that 93% of Brazilians disapprove the attacks that happened in Brasilia. So the challenge for Lula's administration, in my opinion, is knowing how to deal with these radicals that are present in different sectors of Brazilian society.
In terms of developing relations with China, how much priority is President Lula going to attach to that in terms of realizing the goals he has pronounced for his term? For instance, giving dinner to everybody in Brazil, meaning eradicating extreme poverty, and also, you know, dealing with the kind of political divide, the radical political views some people are holding towards his administration.
So you mentioned the relation between Brazil and China during Lula's administration. I think with Lula, there will be better conditions for a broader and deeper relationship between both countries. Firstly, with Lula, Brazil will be more active within the BRICS, and this is a very important topic because during the Bolsonaro's government, Brazil was, Brazil didn't have an active diplomatic position towards BRICS. And this is very important. I mean, Lula's government changed the Brazilian diplomacy towards BRICS when the BRICS is on the way to expanding its numbers of participating countries. Secondly, Lula will undoubtedly want to develop a relation with China that is not limited to trade. There may be greater cooperation in sustainable development in the financial sector and especially in science and technology. And if I could give Lula some advice, I would tell him to bet on strengthening China's cooperation with the northeast of Brazil, and that he could think about proposing and the institutionalization of the BRICS.
What do you think specific areas can witness further collaboration between China and Brazil, and what kind of concrete benefits could that bring to people in Brazil and vice versa to the people of China? Because trade between the two countries really jumped over the last year by 30–40%, both in terms of import and export. So which specific sectors and what concrete benefits will people from both sides see with this increased relationship, warmer relationship, let's say, between Brazil and China in the year to come?
I think Brazil and China could develop better cooperation in science and technology and innovation. There are a lot of space to do more in this area. When I think about, artificial intelligence, 5G in Brazil, and all these innovation initiatives can bring to Brazil an economic development. So it's not only international trade. The international trade between Brazil and China, we know, is well developed. But there are a lot of areas that our countries can develop together. And I think science and technology is the main one.
What is the biggest challenge, do you see, in bridging, the geographical distance between the two sides in terms of developing ties further?
The geographic distance is a huge challenge, we know, but there are two other big challenges to Brazil and China. And the first is due to international context, and the second, the domestic environment in Brazil. So internationally speaking, when I think about the international context, the world is living with a pandemic, still living a pandemic situation that has lasted 3 years. And has had repercussions on the global economy. In addition, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine/NATO adds a lot of uncertainty about the world's future as well. And the United States is being more aggressive in its diplomatic approach in defense of their interests. And the competition between the United States and China is also a factor that Lula will have to take into account and know how to deal with without having to choose a side, to align himself with one country or another. And domestically, as we have already mentioned, Lula finds a country that is currently, I think Brazil, in a certain way, is the stage of an action for the extreme right in the world. And this is a big challenge for Lula. And all these factors will directly or indirectly influence the bilateral relationship between Brazil and China. But I believe that both countries can together bring greater stability to the world, considering both leaders, Lula and the President Xi Jinping.
Evandro Carvalho. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for watching. You've got The Point.